It is so true what they say, the truth will set you free. If you can't tell your story to yourself, and you certainly can't tell your story to other people, can you really tell anyone else's story? Really? Once I could tell my story to me and tell my story to other people, it was very important because keeping it a secret had done me no good.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. What happens when the secret holding you back is one you've been keeping from yourself? Katz is a veteran screenwriter, showrunner, and podcast producer whose credits include Tales from the Crypt. Yeah, that Tales from the Crypt, the one that made our childhood awesome. And after decades of success in Hollywood, Alan hit a personal and creative breaking point that nearly cost him everything. And it wasn't until he confronted a long-buried trauma that he was able to reclaim his voice and rebuild a life that was truly his. In this episode, we talk about the dark side of success, surviving the broken parts of the entertainment industry, and how Alan's storytelling journey took him from screen to podcasting with shows like How Not to Make a Movie and The Donor. He also shares the moment that saved his life and how telling the truth finally set him free. If you've ever questioned the story you've been living, this conversation might just be the beginning of your rewrite. Alan Katz, thanks so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
It is my pleasure to be here, James. I love the whole idea of your podcast.
Thank you. I've gone through several years, I'd say the past decade, the conversation keeps coming up more with people that I meet, especially people who are somewhere around my generation who lament that I did all of these things. I did everything I was told I was supposed to do, and I am successful, but I just don't feel it in a lot of ways. And then the discussion kind of flows to, well, what would you love to do? Then a lot of things get listed that has never even been attempted yet. So A Joyful Rebellion is all about that time when you have to figure out, okay, am I going to still hold on to these dreams, these someday if when kind of scenarios? A lot of people would call it maybe a bucket list, but sometimes it's just a lot simpler. A bucket list kind of makes it sound trivial in a way.
I would agree. Yeah. And where my story fits into your franchise, it's more subtle.
Yeah.
My realization, it wasn't a moment, there was a crisis moment that lasted 2 decades. And it wasn't until I dealt with a secret I didn't even know I was keeping from myself, but it was, that the reason for my 2 decades of descent into depression, and I was set up for failure by myself. And until I dealt with that secret, it didn't matter what I had set my course on. Once I dealt with that secret, mine is a story, proof that the truth will set you free.
And that's a powerful phrase. And a lot of people, they go a long time in their lives without understanding what that means, if ever. And then at some point in their existence, they maybe have the benefit of having that aha moment of like, oh yeah, that's what happened. How did that happen for you?
Well, let me reframe that slightly differently, just as another way to appreciate it. I've always been grateful to Hebrew school for making me the atheist I am today, is how I feel. And that's not entirely true, because I think I dropped from the womb an atheist, and Hebrew school, it iced the cake. But after I went through what I went through, I absolutely understand when religious people say they were born again. I absolutely, after what I went through, and I came out the other side, yeah, absolutely, I was born again, and born in a way that I never was before. And that is my rebellion.
And we should go ahead and set people up for the fact that you had a pretty big success right out of the gate. Is that what you feel set you up for failure?
I did. I've been writing professionally since I was 16. It was the first time I ever got paid for writing anything. And so I think I took writing for granted. It was just something that was always in my toolkit. I went to Vassar, and I was a drama major. I thought I was going to be an actor. I went to one audition after I was graduated from Vassar, and I was terrible. It was my fault. I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form. And I said, as I walked out, what kind of an idiot makes their living this way? I'm going to be a writer instead. A bigger idiot, really. And I swore I would never act again until someone asked me nicely, which I did keep to. I've acted several times in the recent past because people asked me nicely. I was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt because the director, Mick Garris, asked me nicely. But I set out to be a writer. And I figured I was going to be in New York writing plays. New York was the center of the universe as far as I was concerned. I had a friend who I grew up with outside of Baltimore who had become an agent of William Morris, Carol Yumpkis. And Carol said, you should try writing a screenplay. And I'd been toying with it, so I did. And I said to her, she said, this is great. You should come out and meet and greet people. And so in the June 1985, I headed out to L.A. for a week. Absolute New Yorker. That's how I thought of myself. L.A. was the stupidest place on the planet. The land of the avocado head. And when I got there, gosh, everyone was so nice, and the weather. Well, in New York in June, it's already hot and humid, and every place smells like piss. LA's the desert. There's no humidity. It's warm and it's great. And back then, 1985, it was a lot less crowded than it is now. And yeah, people were really, really nice to me. Copious amounts of smoke blown up my ass. Wow, that was incredible. Met incredible people. My agent took me to a movie premiere one evening, St. Elmo's Fire. And that was some heady stuff because William Morris represented the project. And so my view of it all was very backstage. I was seeing it, how all the bits and pieces worked. Someone at the party that was afterwards said, hey, if you got some time off tomorrow morning, you should take a drive through Topanga Canyon. I mean, it's beautiful. And Topanga Canyon is within the city limits. It's just by Malibu. And yeah, it's beautiful. And as I was driving through it 40 years ago, it was a lot less developed than it is now. Going from the 101, the freeway, through the Santa Monica Mountains as they plunge into the Pacific Ocean at PCH. By the time I got to the Pacific Coast Highway, I had been completely seduced. New York, screw New York. And the very next month, I moved out. And in that first week in June, I got very lucky. Among the movie producers that I met was a guy named Gil Adler. And Gil became very quickly my best friend and my creative partner, or my writing partner. Gil came out of theater in New York, but he had trained as an accountant. And so he understood that if you have $1 to spend to make your movie, don't spend $1. You haven't got it. Now, if you can make your movie for 99 cents or 98 cents and make it still look like the dollar, well, now that's really good. Hey, if you can spend 97 cents, make it look like $1 or $2, now you're on to something. So the creative process is all about problem solving. And so his solution to these problems wasn't throw money at it was throw more creativity at it, which is exactly the way that I understood how the creative world works. So we fit together quite beautifully. And he was more producer and I was more writer. There was a great yin and yang to the whole dynamic. HBO loved Gil because he was a strong producer and understood how not to spend a buck. And so they were happy with Gil. They had a high-profile project called Vietnam War Stories. It was in terrible shape. It was over budget, over schedule, shooting in Savannah, and they sent Gil to take it over, and he righted the ship and got it done, and the show won a lot of awards. About a year later, they had problems with another high-profile project, and they wanted Gil to take it over and finish it out, and that was Tales from the Crypt. And because I was Gil's writing partner, that's why I was part of Tales from the Crypt. Now, when HBO started making Tales from the Crypt, back in the early 90s, they were still mostly movies, and they were just beginning to dip their toe into creative, original content. They had one or two shows at that point. They had a thing called First and 10. Oh, yeah. They had a thing called Dream On, which were basically just single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. But if you took tits and fuck out of those shows, they were basically single camera shows that you could put on any network. There was really nothing else larger about them. Suddenly, 4 big Hollywood movie producers, Joel Silver, that's the Lethal Weapon movies, the Matrix movies, Dick Donner, Superman, and Lethal Weapon, Walter Hill, the 48 Hours movies, Bob Zemeckis, Back to the Future, and Forrest Gump. These 4 huge movie producers approached HBO. They said, we want to put our feature vision inside your little TV box. And HBO jumped up and down and said, yeah, do whatever the fuck you want. So the project that they brought was this comic books that they loved as boys, the EC Comics Tales from the Crypt. And they wanted to take this comic book world that they loved and turn it into a show on HBO. And HBO said, great, do whatever you want. Now, normally, if you go and you make a TV show, you go through a development process. All right, how do we translate a 200 and some odd comic books into a cohesive, coherent TV show? More importantly, a franchise. What is it every week that the audience is coming to? What exactly are you selling? That's your franchise. You got to be able to put that into, a handful of words, if that. If you could put it into one word, much easier to sell. Very easy to sell one simple concept. And it's this Rube Goldberg thing. No. The simpler you can make it. And that's the idea of really understanding your own franchise. They knew what they liked, and they could translate it in the first three episodes are amazing. The back order of the first season, which was 6 episodes, they were beginning to lose track a little bit. Normally, you'd hire someone to be a writing producer responsible for getting the franchise from one medium into this medium. But no one was there. HBO was happy, but they ordered a second season, 18 episodes, and they went right to work doing exactly the same thing, just getting things written, no one in charge of maintaining the franchise. The other thing that they did not do, which normal TV shows do, is find a deficit partner to pay for what it actually costs to make the show. HBO had agreed to a budget. In the 90s, when they were doing this, the way that you made money in TV was you had to get into syndication. 65 episodes. And it was all advertising driven. HBO was subscription driven, and they didn't care about 65. It was nothing to them. And they made a deal with the partners where they didn't own anything. HBO owned nothing. And so the risk was all the partners. The budget was the budget. And by the end, HBO was cash flowing everything. The night before the wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial statement that said, guys, you're $1 million cash in the hole. If you want that third and final season where you're going to make some money, get out your checkbooks and give us the $1 million you owe us. The executive producers canceled the wrap party. They fired everybody. They got out their checkbooks and paid HBO.
Wow.
All right, so then now we're going to do the third season. They wanted Gil to oversee the final season of Tales from the Crypt because at least it would be handled responsibly. And because I was Gil's writing partner, and Gil said, well, we need a story editor, a writing producer. HBO didn't care, nothing to them. The partners didn't think of it like a TV show, so nothing to them, so they said yes. And so even though I really was not qualified to do the job that I did at Tales from the Crypt, I became the creative showrunner at Tales from the Crypt. I had 2 jobs. My first job was to translate the franchise from the comic books into the TV show. So I was the last writer any script went through before it went to our department heads, before it went to casting, before we made an episode. I was the final arbiter of all things Crypt. My other job was to write all the Crypt Keeper segments. Well, this is the stories and the actual content didn't go through any kind of development process. Neither did the Crypt Keeper. No one ever asked as they were writing the first couple segments, well, who is he? Whoever wrote the script just tossed lines at the Crypt Keeper, and more or less that's what they would shoot.
Okay.
As I sat down to write the Crypt Keeper segments, I was stymied because I don't know how to write for a cipher. How do you write for a character who isn't? And so just to do my damn job, I needed to vest him with a character. Now, I had grown up loving old movies. I loved the Marx Brothers. And so the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho. And I still needed to fill in with a personality, and being a writer and therefore somewhat lazy, I reached for the closest personality at hand, which was mine. And I filled the Crypt Keeper with me. Now, the Crypt Keeper, as it appears in the old comic books, is an old white guy with stringy hair. The executive producers wanted their own Crypt Keeper for their show, and by happenstance, Joel Silver bumped into and met Kevin Yeager, the special effects guru, and he created the puppet. And then Kevin found John Kassir, who became the voice of the Crypt Keeper. Now you had a great puppet and a great voice, but nothing else. And so suddenly I filled him with a personality. And the strange thing that happened over the course of season 3, because we reinvested in the franchise and in the episodes, and we really went tooth and nail after the biggest stars we could get so that we weren't behaving like a TV series. Yes, suddenly we had a comeback. But the thing that really took off as we went to air in that third season that suddenly made everyone go, oh, Tales from the Crypt was the Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper became the franchise. And really, that's why we still talk about Tales from the Crypt. A bunch of years ago, TNT wanted to do a Thursday night horror wheel, and that M. Night Shyamalan, the director, was going to oversee. And one of the Thursdays was going to be Tales from the Crypt episodes that he was going to redo. When he optioned the comic books, well, the Crypt Keeper he got was the old white guy with stringy hair. He didn't realize he didn't get the Crypt Keeper puppet, which is a separate piece of intellectual property, a separate piece of IP owned by the Crypt partners. Now, the thing about the Crypt partners, the guy who always walked point in everything Tales from the Crypt was Joel Silver. And Joel, he's an impresario, a great producer, but notorious as one of the world's biggest assholes. Lots of people, in fact, everybody, at some point gets to a moment with Joel where they suddenly say, you know what, life is too short. We'll never work with this person ever again. And the Crypt partners all got there, and Bill Gaines' estate, Bill died by the time a lot of this happened, they wouldn't work with Joel ever again if their lives depended upon it. And so the EC Comics and the Crypt Keeper are divorced forever. Where will the children go at Christmas? I have no idea. But doing Tales from the Crypt was creatively, after HBO suddenly ordered several more seasons, was the most amazing creative experience. Everyone who did that show, as we all look back at our careers, would tell you the exact same thing, that making Tales from the Crypt was an amazing creative experience because of all the freedom that we had, the people we got to work with. It was back when we made Tales from the Crypt, movies and TV were two entirely separate universes. There was no crossover. The occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams would go from TV into movies, but if you're going from movies into TV, that meant your career was done. So the fact that we were meshing these two universes together, it wasn't like now where people freely went back and forth. When the first 3 episodes were being screened for cast and crew, and some of the press was there, after the first episode rolled, it was Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, which is an amazing episode. One of the crew members looked at the other and said, wow, that's great TV. And the other one said, it's not TV, it's HBO. And the 2 HBO executives in the row ahead turned back, and they realized they hadn't just heard their new slogan. They heard their culture. Don't think of yourselves as TV. Think of yourselves as something bigger than TV, HBO. And Tales from the Crypt is the show that changed HBO's culture and suddenly opened the door inside their own heads to make things like The Sopranos and Game of Thrones. And in order for these things to happen, it's not automatic. It's a cultural thing. And Tales from the Crypt changed HBO's culture, and HBO ultimately changed TV's culture because the subscription model suddenly became viable. If you make a product that you can't get on TV, it's not TV, it's HBO or Showtime or Netflix. And Netflix really picked up where HBO left off and made it, well, they created the idea of eat it all in one go.
All right.
You want to watch all 10 episodes back to back to back? Be our guest. Just pay us the money. Now, the problem with streaming is that, man, you're going to spend 8-9 months making all those episodes that this person is going to consume in, 2 nights. And then the third night, they're going to look back at you and say, what else you got?
Up next.
Well, unless you got a bunch of other people spending 8-9 months making these things lined up back to back to back, you're going to run out of product. Never mind. No. Actually, never mind. Especially, what is it going to cost to making all these things? Where's the profit point? You're going to have to keep getting more and more subscribers every single month just to keep this game going. Well, that's never going to happen. Never going to happen. And it didn't. And that's why the streaming wars suddenly went when Netflix and basically Disney walked away the winners and everyone else walked away severely wounded. That's part of why the TV and film business are a wreck right now, which we will come back to. Now, like I said, doing Tales from the Crypt was a remarkable experience. And turning the TV show into a franchise, as we did, that opened doors. The success of the franchise made Universal Pictures suddenly think, whoa, we could turn this into a feature film franchise too. And so we made a 3-picture deal to do 3 different movies. Being an anthology, one did not have to be connected to the other. And for a little while, we flirted with making From Dusk Till Dawn. Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn is the first Crypt feature, but for one reason or another, we didn't. And ultimately, we settled on a terrific script called Demon Knight. And got a great director, Ernest Dickerson, a great cast. Billy Zane is he's a great villain. He's a wonderful villain. And Jada Pinkett Smith was the female lead. Bill Sadler was the other hero. Great cast, just an amazing cast, and a very successful movie that still gets a lot of play. Many people consider it a modern horror classic. Of course, this was a 3-picture deal, and because this had succeeded, everyone was, let's get going on the second, and neither Gil nor I came out of horror. Gil came out of theater and the comedy. I went to LA, I thought I was going to write comedies. Horror was just where the opportunities lay. And we didn't want the town to think of us as one-trick ponies, which is what the town kind of does. And so we saw the second Tales from the Crypt feature film as an opportunity to express what else we could do. Now, it still had to be a horror movie, but that covers a lot of territory. And so we had developed a script over the course of 18 months called Dead Easy, which was very different from Demon Knight, which is a monster movie. Dead Easy was a taut psychological thriller about a recovered memory. It took place in the swamps outside of New Orleans, had a wonderful villain, this Harlequin character. And Universal was on board. We were spending money. We were going to hire a young unknown actress named Salma Hayek to play the female lead. We spent months, 6 months in New Orleans, prepping and scouting locations. And we were there in New Orleans 3 weeks, prepping 3 weeks before the start of principal photography. Universal called us and said, stop spending money, come home. You're not making that movie. We got on the plane. We arrived back in Los Angeles, and they put another script under our noses, and they said, you're going to make this movie instead. It's called Bordello of Blood.
Okay.
Now, where did this fucking thing come from? And about this time, a new studio had formed called DreamWorks. DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal at Universal, not the lot, just his deal, and becoming a studio unto himself. And he began making talent deals, as a studio must, and Universal was desperately afraid of losing another huge piece of their talent, one of our executive producers, Bob Zemeckis, to DreamWorks. And Universal went to Bob and said, Bob, we love you at Universal. What can we do to make you stay? And I don't know, any other part of the deal obviously was good enough. Bob stayed. I know one deal point. Universal Pictures agreed to purchase for $500,000, $500,000, the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the future Back to the Future guys, ever wrote when they were students, film school students at USC.
Wow.
And that was it. It was just a deal point as another way to put money into Bob Z's pocket. It had nothing to do with making a movie. But then Universal sat there thinking, we're going to eat $500,000. Hey, wait a minute. Bob's about to executive produce this other horror movie, this Dead Easy thing. We spent $50,000 on that script. Screw that. We're taking that out of their budget. Guys, you're making Bordello of Blood now. Hey, look, it's got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name. Well, that's bigger than Alan Katz and Gil Adler's names. Guys, your release date hasn't changed. It's next Halloween. You still start shooting in 3 weeks. Get to work rewriting this thing and making it. And so the whole creative team had been invested for the same year and a half. This was the movie we all wanted to make. We went from making the project that we were all invested in creatively, emotionally, on all those different levels.
Yeah.
To making a student movie because of a deal. And that was rather crushing. And of course, I guess we could have said, fuck you and walked away, but well, kiss your career. Goodbye. You ain't working on Tales from the Crypt anymore, pal, or probably anywhere else. And so you're between a rock and a hard place. And so, yeah, we set off to make a movie that literally nobody making it wanted to make. Literally. And once you start down that road, do not be surprised when every day is stupider than the day before it. And that is exactly what happened. And once all integrity was shot to shit, oh man, it was a free-for-all. And rewriting the movie was impossible. The main character, the hero, is a small-town detective. Now, ask yourself, how much business really can a detective do in a small town? Now, not enough to be a small-town detective. That's the kind of thing that film school students might create because they haven't lived outside of a college campus. They have no idea how the fucking world works. And a small-town detective is a non sequitur.
Right.
These don't add up. 1 + 1 doesn't equal anything in this case. And so how do you rewrite a character that doesn't exist? How do you justify when someone goes, well, how is it you're a small-town detective? Where's that going to come from? And why is an audience even going to care? You start off with a total impossibility, and it just goes downhill from there. So there was no way really to create anything. And even the villain, there was mythology, but man, there's no time to to think about it, or it's just no time, because in addition to rewriting the script, you got to cast, you got to get it designed, you got to get all these other things happening in your copious free time. And so Joel decided he wanted to cast our 3 leads. And I couldn't tell you to this day why Dennis Miller. Gil and I wanted one of the Baldwin brothers, Danny Baldwin. And at least he'd have given a gritty, real, character-driven kind of a thing. Dennis Miller? Our audience was into special effects makeup. They weren't into some esoteric comedian on HBO. They didn't give a fuck about him. Dennis didn't want to do the movie. He'd blow us off by saying, all right, I'll do it for $1 million. No one in their right mind would pay Dennis Miller $1 million to be in a movie, because no one had done anything remotely like him. $1 million? That wasn't in our budget. We were told $12 million movie. When we approached Universal and we said, hey, can we get some help here, a little breakage? They said, I don't give a fuck about Dennis Miller. Why are you even casting him? No. So we took the money out of where all the money was in the budget, special effects, makeup, the stuff that our audience wanted to come see, to pay for an actor our audience didn't give a fuck about.
Yeah.
And that was my executive producer making that decision over our heads. So we're now as far removed from Crypt as we could possibly be. Now decisions are being made for all the wrong reasons. Okay, Erika Eleniak, I understood, because Joel thought he'd get something going with her, but she was in a long-term relationship, and just after she accepted the role in our movie Bordello of Blood, she decided she didn't want to be that kind of actress in these kind of movies. And Gil, as a producer, but he was also directing the movie, he liked to start work on a Thursday, so that you had Thursday, Friday to work. If suddenly you bumped into problems, you had the weekend to do rewriting and fixing, so that by Monday you could start production in earnest with most of your problems at least solved or identified. And so we had started shooting. Some of the bar scenes didn't involve any of the principals, Thursday, Friday. And we expected Erika Eleniak to be in a plane Saturday, moved on the weekend, to be in wardrobe on Monday, to work on Tuesday. And I get a call from her manager on Saturday that she ain't getting on an airplane because she doesn't want to, ain't going to be that actress in these kind of movies anymore. We have to rewrite it right now before she's going to get on an airplane, or she ain't getting on an airplane. And so to satisfy her, and again, the character had been a former porn star that the detective was a fan of. That was part of the connection. Well, if she's not a former porn star, what was she? What, owned the ice cream parlor nearby, and he was a regular? Okay. She finally agreed. She had formerly been a plus-size porno star who had lost a lot of weight, and that's why she was unrecognizable now. Of course, now I have to justify that to Dennis's character. And I got to say, Dennis, look, your character was a chubby Jason, dude.
Right.
Like, what? All right. But I got to get her on an airplane, so we agreed to make these changes. Erika, she didn't want to be there. Now, Angie Everhart, who plays the villain in the piece, at the time that we were making Bordello of Blood, Angie Everhart was engaged to Sylvester Stallone. And as we were going to make Bordello in Vancouver, Sylvester and Joel was shooting another movie in Seattle called Assassins that Dick Donner was directing with Antonio Banderas and Sly Stallone. And one day on the set, apparently Stallone approached Joel and said, hey, Joel, you may make a movie in Vancouver. I'll put my girlfriend Angie in the movie. That we could visit each other across the border. And Joel, rather than being a responsible executive producer and saying, that's a great idea, Sly. Let me check with the guys first, make sure it works for them.
Yeah.
He said, that's a great idea, Sly, period. So suddenly we were obligated to using his fiancée to be the villain in our movie. Now, Angie's a lovely human being. She really is a wonderful person. She was a supermodel. She had not trained as an actress. She wanted to be an actress, but she wasn't an actress. And the villain in your movie is the most important part, and how you cast the villain is so important. Now, here's the thing about villains, about actors in general. I cast a lot of actors. And over the course of my time in movies and TV, I can tell you one thing. Whenever I cast an actor to be in a movie or TV show, the last thing on earth I ever wanted them to do was act. On the stage, yeah, the people in the last row have to see and hear you. You have to act. But the camera is right in your face. And now, please don't act. I wanted actors to be as nakedly honest, as nakedly vulnerable, as emotionally naked as they could possibly be. We'll give them a different name, put some different words in their mouth. But at key moments, I need them to be these things, not act them. Be them. If they act them, the camera will see. We'll have to cut it all out or hire someone else. You need to be, because that's how the camera and the microphone here in podcasting, the camera sees artifice and so does the microphone. It hears. We hear the subtle things are in our animal brains. We understand all these things. We understand what is and we understand what isn't. All right. Billy Zane is an amazing villain. He's a great villain in Titanic and the other places where he's been villain. He's a great villain in Demon Knight because he's an egomaniac. And there is something, I'll use the word villainous, about him. So that when he taps into it, he's not acting it. These are parts of just who he is. He's tapping into who he is. But it's got to be there for him to tap into. Angie is a lovely human being. There's not a villainous bone in her body. The only way she can even approximate such a thing is to act it. And not having experience as an actor, even to try to fake it, she didn't have the tools. She didn't have a toolkit, simply didn't have the experience. But then we didn't cast her because we suddenly saw something. Oh, this would be a piece of genius because of how she is. This will work perfectly. That's not why we cast her. So we set her up to fail. And it turned out that actually Sly had an ulterior motive. He intended to break up with her, and we were the consolation prize. And he did break up with her 2/3 of the way through the movie. Hey, I got you a movie, didn't I? Now, we had been aware the whole time that he was cheating on her because our production office was in contact with the Assassins production office in Seattle. And after 2 weeks of her visiting him over the weekends, the whole point of the exercise, our production office got a call from their production office. Can you hold Angie for the weekend? To do what? Her homework? Not her babysitter? And so, no, was the answer. So that's why we hired Angie. This was my own personal Waterloo. And it got, so our Canadian crew hated us, and with good reason. The movie is a mediocre little horror movie. It still plays. It still plays every Halloween. It still has a life.
But you were given an impossible task.
And the making of it shattered a couple things. All the things, the wonderful creative experience had turned entirely negative. And suddenly all the success, everything was corrupted. So I had gone from one thing to, it's kind of diametric opposite. And we did the last season of Crypt in London, which was great thought, but we didn't plan it out well at all. And so great locations. I think with one or two exceptions, the episodes suck. And that was also my fault because I was spent. As we were supposed to go into a new science fiction series with the partners, they fired me. And they kept Gil, and I had expected Gil, after they fired me, to walk with me. And he didn't. And so my best friend and my creative partner and I split. And we did not speak for 25 years.
Oh, whoa.
And I started down into a 2-decade-long deepening depression and a writer's block I didn't even know I was in. Now, I spent a couple seasons on The Outer Limits as a co-executive producer, which was great. I had great experience in Vancouver making that show. But otherwise, I started down a long, terrible road. And the other thing that I didn't realize I was battling was a secret that I ultimately kept for myself for 45 years. And this was the thing that undermined my confidence in myself, never mind my abilities. My abilities got me to a certain point. But after a certain point, who you are has got to step forward and be the foundation for all that stuff. There has to be a you. There has to be a there that believes enough in you and what you're doing to justify people's, the content. But it's about relationships too. Relationships are super important. That's how you do this. I was bad at relationships before I formed my bond with Gil, but losing Gil 3 days before Christmas 2016, I came within literal inches of killing myself. And I had been contemplating a mood stabilizer, but my dad was a surgeon. I grew up in the medical culture, and I knew that my GP, whatever mood stabilizer he had on hand, the last pharmaceutical rep who walked through his office probably said, hey, you got any depressed patients? Give them some of this, see if it helps for them. Now, mood stabilizers are very tricky. We don't know how the mind works, and we know how mood stabilizers work, but not really, and it's a crapshoot. Because it's 6 to 8 weeks most of the time to even find out if the little lab experiment is working for you or against you. It's so tricky, and I did not want to be a lab experiment for my GP unintentionally. So I did my own research. And when I suddenly realized I was at the point where I could do something utterly, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, if I die, I do. Fuck it, I don't care. It was do something or you will come to that point. And so I went to my GP. I told him what I had done. I said, here's what I want to take. I had done my research, and he whipped out his smartphone. He said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he wrote the prescription. I picked it up. I went home. I told my family what I wanted to do, and I took the first dose. And then I got super lucky. Within 36 hours, I leveled. I felt the mood stabilizer, put the darkness in a box. The darkness was still there, doesn't go away, but it can't get at you. It's like if it can reach through the bars, but it can't get you. And once suddenly the darkness, the self-loathing, the intense self-loathing, the rage was enough that I could just lean into a bus as it was passing by. Whatever happened to me, fuck it, who cares? Suddenly, the rage could no longer get at me, and because the rage could no longer get at me, I could confront the fact that everything that was driving this was the secret that I've been keeping for 45 years, that at age 14, I was sexually molested twice by the religious director at the synagogue where my family belonged in Northwest Baltimore. And it happened twice. And the first time is bad because it's happening, but it's the second time that for me was really the most damaging thing, because the second time happened because you didn't say anything the first time. And in the midst of the second time, as it's happened again, you realize you did this to yourself. This is your fault. That's not true. But now you begin to convince yourself that this awful thing is your fault. And that becomes the pattern. Every terrible thing that happens to you thereafter, this is your fault. Now, in adulthood, yeah, sometimes it is your fault. There's a difference between taking responsibility, but your ability to discern the two is fractured. And ultimately, you blame everything on yourself. Even when it's not your fault, well, that doesn't solve problems. That's not a solution to a problem. But if you're going to take everything onto yourself and condemn yourself for them, it's going to catch up with you. Once I confronted this, it is so true what they say, the truth will set you free. And if you can't tell your story to yourself, and you certainly can't tell your story to other people, can you really tell anyone else's story, really? Once I could tell my story to me and tell my story to other people, it was very important because keeping it a secret had done me no good. Telling it, and with as much perspective now as I possibly could, that became important. Telling the truth, because that was essential. I went through a transformation. I went from being, I think, a really good writer to being a storyteller. It took a little bit of time. Here's how I realized what had happened. The pandemic happened. Podcasting suddenly had really bad for many, many people, not bad for podcasting. The pandemic.
Right.
3 Tales from the Crypt fans from different parts of the country found each other and started a podcast called Dads from the Crypt.
Right.
And their franchise was they reviewed all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and gave parenting advice. And great franchise. So Jason Stein, one of the dads, reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. You want to sit in? And I said, yeah, great. And I sat in. It was a great time. It was great fun. A couple weeks later, Jason reached out to me again. He said, hey, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in again? And I said, Jason.
Yeah.
The story I'm making, Bordello of Blood, is not a half hour with you guys. It's a podcast unto itself. And suddenly, that's how the How Not to Make a Movie podcast was born, because certainly Bordello of Blood is how not to make a movie. It's the textbook. I've been telling those stories for 20 years. And I said, all right, here's a way to tell them in a completely cathartic way. And I want to be balls to the wall honest. I was in a much healthier headspace. And there was only 2 people I wanted to throw a little shade at. Dennis Millers, because he's not a pleasant human being, and he didn't have to be the way that he was. But that's just Dennis being Dennis. The person I really wanted to take to task and call out was Stallone, because of what he did to Angie and just the utter callousness of it all. And more than anything, because he made us his co-conspirators in betraying Angie. We knew what he was doing, and yet we couldn't say anything. And I resent being his co-conspirator in betraying her confidence. So, fuck you, pal. Fuck you. Aside from that, the person I wanted to take to task was me. And suddenly, the truth having set me free, I could appreciate myself and my actions, my lack of confidence, my lack of desire to be doing that job, but then my lack of confidence in all kinds of decision-making moments where if I'd been a confident producer, the movie was always going to be what the movie was, but I could have made the experience much better for everyone involved if I'd been a more confident producer, but I wasn't capable of that because there was something that had gnawed at any foundations for confidence I could possibly have had. In order to tell the story of the making of Bordello of Blood, the person I was especially going to have to reach out to if I was going to tell the story honestly was Gil, who I hadn't spoken to in 25 years, and there was a lot of animosity in that breakup. But I wanted to tell the story honestly, and I reached out to him and I said, look, I want to do this. And he said, it's a really painful story. I don't know. I said, it might be cathartic. But I said, here's the thing. We haven't talked about our relationship and what happened and all that stuff. I said, I don't want to talk about it beforehand. I want to do all that if we're going to do it live on mic.
Wow.
And he said, okay. And that was the secret sauce. The willingness to be balls to the wall, honest. And it's all there. It's all there in the moments when we finally talk about what happened to our relationship. I wasn't looking for an apology, but just the acknowledgement that it shouldn't have happened. And that rekindled our friendship and our creative relationship. We were working on a couple things together. And the honesty of the storytelling, well, it impressed Entertainment Weekly's Clark Collis, who called that first season of the Hell Not to Make a Movie podcast the best film podcast of 2022. And the thing that blew him away was it's a very nuts and bolts, really down, really as granular as you can possibly get about how movies get made and how bad movies get made. Why does this happen? What happens with this loss of integrity? Sometimes it's with the best of intentions. How does that happen? How do you turn a successful franchise into that? Why would you do such a thing? So he appreciated that. In the second season, having told the story, it just became that granular nuts and bolts view of the creative process and what happens when craft turns to crap.
Yeah.
But I found that I really loved podcasting. I loved telling stories in the medium. Now, I had a friend who approached me with a story that he wanted to turn into a movie or TV series. And I said, no, you don't. Now, here's the thing. To take an idea from my head and turn it into, let's say, a TV series, oh my God, years. Years to pull this off. You used to write the script to get it right. Years. Then, all right, it's a TV series. You've written the first episode. Well, now you got to write what's called the Bible. That's episode 1. What happens in episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the rest of the first season? Season 2, season 3, season 4. How many seasons were you planning? What are the larger story arcs here? What are the characters? How do they move through all this? And what's the environment? What's all of this like? That's 50 or 60 pages. That doesn't write itself. It doesn't get written overnight. That's 5 or 6 months, really, if you're going to do it right, if you're lucky. All right, now you spent a couple of years just to get it ready for the marketplace. All right, now you got to get an executive to read it. Well, to get the executives to read it, you have to create what's called a pitch deck. And that's kind of a PowerPoint presentation. So it's a comic book version of the whole thing in about 90 seconds just to get them to fucking read it.
Yeah.
And then if they say yes, that's just the top of the meat grinder. The reading. If they say yes, now you got to go through the whole production process. And man, everything that's going to happen by the time you get to the sausage at the end, who knows what the fuck you're going to have. And in between, even there and there are thousands of assholes standing in your way. And at any one point, any one of those assholes can kill your project dead.
Yeah.
Now, to take an idea from my head, turn it into a podcast, there's only one asshole standing in my way. It's me.
Yeah. Familiar.
And if I'm willing to get the fuck out of my own way and just do the project, well, okay, I'm responsible for finding the audience or helping the audience find it and marketing it, but I'll take that risk. Because the other thing that happens is that I own it. Now, part of what you're trying to do when you pitch a show or try to sell a script is you're trying to impress upon these executives what your IP is. What's the franchise? What are you selling? What's the IP? So really, a lot of what you're trying to do is make them understand the IP. But if I do it as a podcast, I've put the IP right there in the podcast. It's on the table where everyone can see it. Everyone knows what the IP is. And if the trick is create great content, okay, all right, no, I'll take that challenge too. But all right, let's say I've made great content. Wow. Someone would think, that'd make a great movie or TV show, one of these executives would think. And whereas in the old days, I would have had to go and sell it to them and sing and dance and say, please understand
Right.
my IP. Please try to get it. Now it's flipped because they're coming to me as a buyer. So really, a lot of what I think podcasting gives us the ability to do is to flip that dynamic away from the money and towards the creatives because we own everything. And as you create great content, keep in mind the people in the executive suites are really risk averse. And to get them to leap into the void with a project they're going to have to develop and use their imaginations, holy shit, you're asking for trouble. Whereas you do it as a podcast, hey, they can explain to their boss, hey, look at this successful podcast. It's a great story, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone covers their ass. So even as a business model, it's a great way to tell all the same stories. And hey, you actually get to tell them. Now, I'm going to say it costs nothing to make a podcast. That's not true. All had a budget and we could pay people to do the pre-edit, all the stunt work that's involved in getting an episode together, because you edit your episodes, I edit my episodes, and it takes time. And I do story episodes, and there are interviews that have to be pre-edited. You'd figure out this is going to fit into that part of the story. This takes time. Doing it all by yourself, so many hours in a day, you have only so much energy. But my friend approached me with this story that had happened to him, and that became The Donor, my first story podcast, a DNA horror story. My friend Hal worked his way through medical school in the mid-1980s as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years, he was a successful radiologist. He joined 23andMe, curious about his health genes. It didn't occur to him the larger ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. And he lost his donor anonymity. Suddenly, 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was Hal, a sperm donor. These were 25, 26, 27-year-old people suddenly bumping into the fact that the man who raised them, who they thought was their biological father, wasn't. Half of who they thought they were is actually someone else. Now, the 7th brought a thing called genetic sexual attraction to the table. Genetic sexual attraction, the adoption community has known about this for a long time. People who are genetically related but who are not raised together. And a lot of the incest taboo that we feel, there's scientific data that says a lot of it has to do with imprinting that comes from proximity. Because we grow up together, and it's the proximity does a lot of imprinting that later in life will inhibit seeing each other in sexual terms.
Okay.
And this imprinting is very important. People who do not have that imprinting, when they meet as adults later, they discover someone who I feel like they've known their whole lives. They laugh at the same things. They complete each other's sentences. They have a bond like they've never had with anybody else. And if there's the sexual spark, look out. The woman who coined the term genetic sexual attraction was named Barbara Gagne. She gave up a son at the age of 16 for adoption, met him 25 years later. As a young adult, she fell head over heels in love with him, and he fell in love with her. She was quite ready to have sex. He wasn't quite there. She described it as the most intense thing she'd ever felt in her entire life. Now, Hal had been married for 20 years to a woman who brought a son from a previous marriage into their marriage, and he raised that son as his own, adopted him later as an adult, but he had never raised any biological children of his own. So suddenly having these 7 biological children, these are young adults, he wasn't going to father them. They had men who had fathered them, but he was very open to being fatherly towards them. And he had lots of money, and he was quite willing to cut them in on the inheritance because they were blood. So when this daughter brought genetic sexual attraction, it was like a hand grenade being tossed into the tent. It just, all his intention to have this family, this amazing, unusual family, blew up because the donor conceived siblings. They call each other, it's a problematic term. Some of them like it, some of them hate it, but some refer to each other as diblings, donor conceived siblings. And some of them very frequent. Those are very intense bonds because this is a half-brother, half-sister you didn't know you had. In a lot of cases, because the donor conceived nature, there are single children who thought, oh, I don't have any siblings, who suddenly discover, oh, yeah, you do. And as some people have discovered, there are some sperm donors who were terrifyingly prolific. There's a guy in Holland who they think might be responsible for several thousand children. That's really bad because of genetic sexual attraction. When those people bump into each other, they're genetically related, but they were not raised together. They don't know about this. This is happening. That genetic connection is causing them to have intense relationships, and they have sex.
Wow.
So it's a very real thing. Well, how could you possibly tell this story in any other medium than a podcast?
Right.
And I said to Hal, look, first of all, he was going to tell the story anonymously. I said, well, you can't do that, and you can't then change everyone's name because you're a completely untrustworthy narrator. I can tell your story, and I can also then protect your identity, and rather than losing my integrity, I actually gain integrity. I become like the referee. And as I began to then lay out how we were going to tell this story, I'd never heard a story like this in my entire life. I have a taste for weird stories, as my bio says, and I couldn't make this up if I tried. I didn't get away with it. Never. And I discovered as I was telling Hal's story that I had become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which is a podcaster. The freedom was like doing Tales from the Crypt, but better. Because all the seasons I did at Tales from the Crypt, the 70 some odd episodes, I got 3 notes from HBO. This is that kind of freedom to just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, there's no audience, you're doing it for yourself, which is okay too. But if you want to find an audience, you're going to have to work the room. Well, Telling Hal's story, and that's 7 episodes, The Donor, a DNA horror story, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Doing the background research of the donor-conceived community, I met a number of those lovely people, and several agreed to talk on mic for me. And one of them was named Donna Hall. And Donna learned at 40 that she was donor-conceived, which was earth-shattering to her. The rest of Donna's story was, in a way, even more fascinating. I said, Donna, you're a podcast unto yourself. She said, yeah. I know. And that became The Hall Closet, my second story podcast, wherein it's 8 episodes, wherever you find your favorite podcast, The Hall Closet. Donna Hall grew up in the 80s and early 90s in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia. The Halls weren't the Corleones, but they made national headlines just the same. Donna's mom, Phyllis, maybe the worst mom ever, spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepdad, John Hall, a true criminal mastermind, for real. He was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars on bullshit confessions that he concocted to mitigate his own considerable legal jeopardy. Among the people he put away was his own stepson, Herb, for 18 months awaiting trial for a murder that he did not commit. John Hall also put a man named Walter Ogrod on death row in Pennsylvania for 24 years for a murder Walter did not commit. When Pennsylvania finally released Walter, they paid him $9.1 million because of their mistake. There is still one person serving a life sentence in Pennsylvania, a guy named David Dixon, based on a John Hall, a bullshit confession. And so Donna tells the story of what it was like growing up in this family where every single day, one or more of the adults in her life was committing one kind of a crime or another, small, medium, enormously large. And she is a wonderful storyteller. She's got a vivacious personality. And it's not just true crime like you've never heard it. It's really her journey toward safety, but most importantly, empowerment. And so that's The Hall Closet. Well, in the middle of doing that podcast, I suddenly decided this is all I want to do. This is all I want to do. So I decided that my little company, Costard and Touchstone Productions, that this is what we're going to do. And I've got 4 podcasts out right now, and I've got another dozen in various stages of production. And in terms of what your podcast is about, I am living my joyful rebellion. Every single podcast is the answer to that question. This is my company's goal, is to make the world a better place through storytelling.
It's a good goal.
The truth will set everybody free. Because really what I've discovered is that everybody has a story. It's just a function of, you got to tell it the right way. Even a great story told badly, you ruined it. It's like a great joke and you ruin the punchline. But everyone has a story. That means everyone has a podcast. At least one. Some people have multiple podcasts. But my goal is to tell each and every one of them as honestly as I possibly can. In the wake of the last election, American journalism was dying anyway, but that kind of put a stake through its heart. And a number of journalists are looking for, where do you practice journalism now that legacy journalism is revealed to be absolutely soulless, gutless, and useless in the preservation of a democracy. Utterly useless. Where do all the journalists who give a shit go to continue being journalists and tell their stories? Podcasting. Because there's no corporate overlord, and you can tell your stories. Now, just with the rest, you got to find your audience. I had that movie line go, if you build it, they will come. Make great content. Be patient. An audience will come. Be patient, but make great content first. So I'm working with a number of journalists on various different podcasts. The first one that's going to drop, I'm working with a photojournalist named David Swanson. David took one of the iconic 9/11 photos of the first responders down to the pit. He's covered wars from Bosnia to Afghanistan to Iraq, natural disasters, Katrina, and the fires here in California, and red carpet events, possibly the most horrifying places of all. Though his pictures speak 1,000 words each, they can tell you what it looked like standing where he stood, but they cannot tell you what it felt like. And what it feels like standing in a war zone, in a natural disaster, that's a whole other thing. And so that's what the podcast is about. he's been, on numerous occasions, it's happened to him where he was doing his work. Someone would walk up to him and say, are you the writer or just a photographer? David's podcast is called Just the Photographer. David talking about what it's like, what it feels like working in a war zone. And war zones are strange places where all the rules of civility and civilization, they're up in the air. And they can be terrifying and yet at times perversely beautiful. So that's what that podcast captures. And this is what podcasting allows us to do, to get down to the granular, the nuts and bolts, and to tell a story in as much detail as we need to tell the story. And so long as we do not violate our audience's trust, they will continue to take our stories and our voices and put them in their most intimate space between their ears, inside their heads.
It sounds like you come full circle because you started your career with a lot of latitude for creativity. And you wanted to tell stories that were entertaining, and then you went through a darker period where you were very much in a box, still trying to bring that energy, but at the same time just being stifled again and again. And now you've brought it around to where you are the person who brings through creativity. You're the person that you answer to.
I would put it this way. I was a court jester before, and then in my brief acting career, I performed in 2 Shakespearean plays, and I played the character Costard in Love's Labour's Lost and the character Touchstone in As You Like It. And both characters are wise fools who speak truth to power. And that is another facet of what I want. That's what my company does. Yes, we are wise fools speaking truth to power, but that's what storytellers are.
Yes. I'm guessing that's what makes it feel for you really meaningful. And purposeful. Yeah.
I'm not just a court jester now. I'm a court jester with purpose, because the jests are all to speak truth to power and not just amuse the motherfuckers.
Yeah. And there's a lot of truth that needs to be spoken.
Holy shit. Holy shit. We live in an age, I think of this as the golden age of bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, when I came within inches of killing myself, I had quite convinced myself that I could do this, and my children, my wife, my family, they'd recover in time. Yeah, there was some insurance money, and the money would move over everything. That's bullshit. Absolute bullshit. As much bullshit as the whole thing that was motivating all of this. And as I was getting healthy, I realized that I had come within literal inches of bullshitting myself to death, which I thought was hilarious. So I've been doing a blog for a lot of years called How to Live Bullshit Free. And in fact, I've written a book called How to Live Bullshit Free, A Practical Guide to Not Killing Yourself, which is nearly written, and I'm living the last chapter right now. And so once I get to a certain point, I think I can make as much of a case as possible. Don't do it.
Yeah.
You have no idea once you confront the thing that is haunting you, that is tormenting you, and you can become every last bit of yourself you've always wanted to be. You can really be all you can be, I guess is one way to put it. It would shock you how much more of you there is to be.
What was it when you realized that that was the secret you had been keeping from yourself? What was it that flipped the switch or brought you to the understanding that it was something you needed to work through, deal with, face?
It's strange. About a week before I came clean with myself, my wife and our daughter, she was in her early 20s, but late teens at the time, we went to a movie which was about a sexual assault. And we talked about it in the car afterwards going home. And not for 2 seconds did I ever go, well, in my experience, it was sitting there. It was sitting there. And it was so relevant, that movie. Now, maybe did that kind of sit there and like a little time bomb, just wait for the right moment to go off? That's entirely possible. But I don't know exactly when, somewhere inside my head, either it achieved a kind of critical mass and the truth was no longer willing to be bound. The fact that I could tell myself the truth and that the anger wasn't going to happen. It's like a circuit breaker. And the way that my mood stabilizer, what it feels like is, and the first time it happened was like, what the fuck was that? And back in the day, anything could set me off, man. Just some stupid comment, a political comment on the radio, and the rage would take root in my stomach and suddenly rise like a lava plume. And just as it went to explode out of my mouth in a fit of rage, it dissipated like a soap bubble.
Oh.
I knew I had felt the rage, but it was gone. Yeah, you were angry, but now you're not. And like a circuit breaker, just shutting it off. And it happened again shortly thereafter. And I realized that's how the drug works. And once I became confident about the fact that the rage, I just didn't have it anymore. It was gone. The rage was gone. And if the rage was gone, then I could talk. I could confront anything. And literally, even in my life, little things, that basic problems were in the house that would, oh my God, I'd explode. Now what am I going to do? Like suddenly, okay, let's deal with it. Really, my relationship with my kids, which was always good, became far better because you didn't have to walk gently around Dad so you don't set him off because he's in a bad mood. Suddenly, I don't do bad moods. I don't have bad moods. I walk around I would describe it as a perpetual state of bliss. Now, just mood stabilizer just keeps the darkness in a box. And I have a terrific therapist, and that's perspective. Important to keep talking about everything every day. She's always checking my work. It's important. You got to check your work. The important thing about learning to live bullshit free is start with your own. The whole world is full of bullshit, but until you deal with your own, leave everyone else's alone. Really and truly. And if you begin to deal with your own bullshit, you'll discover you don't have time to deal with other people's bullshit. Really, you don't. Really. And when you get your own bullshit house in order, suddenly, you become much more forgiving of if I do this. Yes, you will. And you know it. This is the little bullshit that we live with, the incidental daily bullshit. But it's the stuff where you convince yourself about your relationships. If I do this, that will happen. No, you know that. If I do this, that will happen. And if I don't call them, it'll be okay. No, that's bullshit. If I betray this or I betray that, and there will be no ramifications. Yes, there will be. It is learning to handle all that and to be more truthful with yourself when it matters, and when it matters especially. That helps a lot.
Alan, this has been such a fun conversation. Where's the best place for someone to get in touch with you or like see your latest work, see your podcast?
costardandtouchstone.com, https:// costardandtouchstone.com. That's COSTARDAND, Touchstone, TOUCHSTONE, just how it sounds.com. That's where you'll see all of our current podcasts. You can see what we have. You can link to them and listen to them. And you'll also see some of the podcasts that are imminently due up here upon the planet, because there are quite a few, and I'm excited by them all. I'm excited by the ones that aren't up there yet. I want to get them close to so that we can get an audience excited. Yeah, I love podcasting. I love our whole podcasting community. I walk around in a perpetual state of bliss. I'm living my best life every day. Hey, how much more rebellious you want to be?
That's right. And, this show is all about people who have been through their own joyful rebellion. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, those folks end up being the perfect people to help others through their own.
And that is an important part of the mission. It is essential. Yeah. Yes. When you get to this point of happiness, how do you bring other people into this mix to give them the perspective that will allow them within their own context to be hopefully as happy as I am? Just look, it's a crazy fucking world. It's nuts, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. The trick is, how do you find a way to survive in it, and if you can, thrive in it?
Thrive, and hopefully, if you have the ability, bring others along with you.
And help the community to survive and thrive right along with you. So when we get past this, and we will, because it's the nature of how human beings are, we're cyclical. And there is this back and forth between the need to be free and the need to control. And the one spurs the other, and the other spurs the one. We're not doing anything new, alas.
Right.
We're not. The two sides of our nature, the darkness and the light, always fighting each other.
That's a great reminder to end things on. Alan, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you, James. It was a pleasure spending time with you, and I love the whole concept of your podcast, that my story and it could hitch their wagons together. I'm thrilled to pieces.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.